unrealistic as it sounds, I want each picture that I'm working on to be the only picture that I'm working on. To go a bit further, the only picture that I've ever worked on, and to go even a bit further, the only picture that anyone has ever done. Get up a bit of strength and go to work. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Oh, it's warm.
Very.
The
Are you hot?
Budley has come out at its very best now.
Isn't it lovely?
Since that thunderstorm. What you laying? What you laying more?
Sorry.
What you lay closer in?
A little, yeah. Yeah. It's a little, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, it was just that.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's it.
Bring it forward this way.
Yeah, I can do it. Oh, good. That's fine. I'm very demanding in one sense, but very unspoilt in another. If the person is there and quite likes being there and sitting, I don't mind if they're quite still and that sort of thing, because there's an understanding. And if I do a signed language like I'm working it, I go, there's something established, and David, almost without knowing, would know what it means. Also, if you know them well, you know if they're getting tired, you know that what they're like, you know they might like a drink or rest, you know more.
Do you think the type of
friendship or relationship you have with the sitter, does that roll into the actual painting?
There must be
Seeing
something.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And when you have paintings with 2 or more people in, with this one of Celia, Paul and Angus,
Yes.
is the dynamic between the 2 people in the painting?
Well, I'm aware of it, and it's certainly more of a strain. Hello, very nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Wow, I love this.
I may say I've known, John and I have known each other since we've been 15, so it goes back a bit.
I'll never forget Lucian. I went up to London once, and we had a drink in the Cafe Royal bar, and there were still these old fogies left over from Oscar Wilde or Max Beerbohm. And Lucian and I came in. Lucian was standing on one leg like a stork. And it was very arresting to see, I mean, and you could see all these sort of old Lord Alfred Douglas types sort of pointing, saying, that's Freud's boy, that's Freud, or Freud's grandson, that one. Look at him.
I had a book I took out of my grandfather's library, and it said, Selected Limericks by Norman Douglas, and it said on the front page, please don't show to Professor Freud. And so I said to my grandfather, I found this book, it said it mustn't be shown to you, can I have it? Well, if it says that, take it. There was one about my grandfather in it, which I remember.
How'd it go?
It went, those girls who frequent picture palaces have no use for this psychoanalysis, and although Dr. Freud is extremely annoyed, they cling to their long-standing fallacies. Fallacies and fallacies,
Yep.
you see the pun. Pretty
It's
good.
very good.
Very good, don't you think?
Very
They
good.
cling to their long-standing fallacies. Very good.
One of the first things I remember of yours was that 3-legged horse.
There was a sculptor at Bryanston called Willy Sukop, who was known in his time, who was a teacher. He was encouraging. And my father, rather heroically, since he was a very conventional, quiet architect, took it to the Central School, and I got me in at the age of 15, which is, they took me.
On the strength of the sculpture?
The horse.
And you never really did any sculpture after that,
No.
did you? But
Why has it only got 3 legs?
I ran out of stone.
it's a very, very good answer.
I have very few people looking at things, and one reason, apart from that's how I live, that if they said something, however putting off or unhelpful, it could, I feel, could help to fuck up what I'm trying to do.
You and Francis would comment on each other's work. wouldn't you?
Yes.
Never forget the first time, or almost the first time I went to see Francis. He had Max Factor makeup in front of him, and he was rehearsing his brush strokes by taking the makeup as if it were pigment and playing it on his face. Did
Yes.
you ever see him do that?
Yes. I used to at one time sit for Francis, and he said I was the only person who he could actually work from. One reason was the people he wanted to work from were male horse he'd picked up, and if Francis said, go and stand over there, they'd stand over there, and after about less than 5 seconds, said, Will that do then? You see, they wouldn't. They weren't very helpful. And then, when Francis found John Deacon, he got John Deacon to photograph these people in particular positions, and that helped Francis enormously.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that really gave a great jump up to his work.
But do you think it influenced your work, Lucian? I mean, being with Francis in the day, did it affect how you worked?
Well, not directly, because Francis seemed to have such marvelous technical ability, which I felt I had none.
Right.
But it's very hard to tell. It's very hard to tell. I used to go there and watch him work, and we'd go out, and then he'd drink and everything and pass out, and then I'd go back and work. It wasn't very late, sometimes 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, and then I'd work for a long time. But I can't tell if it must have affected me, but it didn't consciously, because I hated that sort of thing. I mean, I hated things that looked like other things.
Lucian's paintings, because he's not deceived by outward appearances. I mean, he gets down to the nitty-gritty of the men and women and children he paints, and establishes this. And therefore, they are enormously historically important, because they're facts.
As it were, biological facts. When
Yes.
I've reached a certain stage or gone, I'm trying to do something that will belong to the person that I've invented, who of course is based on you, but as far as I'm concerned, it's got to be in relation, in proportion, in rhythm and tune with the person in my picture.
You know this sitter better than almost any other sitter.
Yes.
I mean, that counts for a great deal, I would
For
imagine.
me, yes, because it would affect the form.
Yes.
For me. A naked portrait is a person, a human animal with their clothes off. That's really, wouldn't you say that was
Yes,
right?
they're facts. They really have to do very much with the time and the people who are involved and the social group from which the characters come. I mean, thank God, there's no political or particular philosophical attitude to them, but they're all the better for not having that, and from having, I mean, they're Lucian's portraits of nudes, of places, and they're so wonderfully done, and they're so convincing that they will last. Lucian, do tell us about going to Vienna with Marie-Laure de Noailles. It's such a great story.
I can't remember, but there's a funny thing. I don't talk about my life, not that it's that interesting, but when I told you, I laughed so much that I more or less forgot everything. I told you in some detail, I think.
Yeah, well, she wanted to put a plaque on the house of Freud in Vienna, didn't she?
Yes,
and she
Belfast.
took you to down to Vienna to do it, and
Yes.
gave a dinner, didn't she?
Yes.
And she also got the son of the Baron Sacher-Masoch, the man who invented masochism.
And she, Marie-Laure herself, prided herself on being an ancestor of the Marquis de Sade.
She was great-granddaughter, I think, of the
Great-granddaughter.
Great-granddaughter of the Marquis de
And
Sade.
she said, and so there was this dinner at Baron Sacher-Masoch's house, and Marie-Laure stood up and she said, ist Masoch, und pointing at me, und ist Freud and ich bin sad.
She'd united this trio.
People
rounded
looked
up.
for the door. That was extraordinary. My family was Jewish on both sides, and my father was an architect, studied to be. And that's where he met my mother at university, at Munich, I think, a university town.
But they were very liberal.
They were liberal to do with education, wealth and leisure. I went from public school Bryanston straight to the Central, which was in Holborn, after all. I used to go to the nearest thing to a nightclub that I knew, which was a late night cafe, which I think you went to, called the Coffee Ann. The nightclub was in London, but first time I talked to girls, for instance, I'd never done before. They said, were you at an art school? I said, the Central. Annie Goosen said, the Central, you can't go there. And I said, why not? Because there's only one art school worth going to in England, and that's the East Anglian School of Painting and Drawing in Dedham in Essex. So I went home and said to my parents, I said, you sent me the wrong art school. There's only one art school in England. That's the East Anglian School of Painting and Drawing in Dedham, Essex, run by Cedric Morris and his boyfriend, Arthur Letaine. So they wrote, it's very nice of them, and I was taken on there. And then I apparently burnt the school down, because I got rather keen on smoking, partly because of George Gross and that kind of art of very dashing people. So I used to smoke a cigar a day and one at night. I didn't know how to smoke cigars, so I put my cigar down in the studio, went across to my room in the Marlborough Head opposite, and woke up to shouts and screams and marvellous noises, lovely sunshine. I looked out of the window and it was like a children's book, the art school, flames out of every window. The most exciting thing was we had models in those days like they do now, except the models stayed in the art school, and we had something not then unheard of, a Chinese model staying in the art school, cheaper than living in the pub. As the school was aflame, the Chinese model dived out of the window, which was the most marvellous sight. I know I used to be linked to all these fires.
One of the places I used to see Lucian was in this wonderful bar called the Caribbean. Do you remember that?
Yes, very well. I love it.
And you used to be there dancing with Michael Wishart's mother.
Yes.
And I would be there with Michael Wishart. There's another old pianist.
Granny Blackett.
Granny Blackett. There's a wonderful old queen.
Yes.
Who used to sort of redo the words of songs.
Yes.
You stepped out of a drain.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
You looked ridiculous, dear, in your old satin train, with your pyjamas on, all your mascara gone, just like O'Hara gone with the wind. That's how it went.
Don't forget the underground bar at the Ritz. Do you remember in the basement
Yes,
bar
very
at the Ritz,
well.
which was marvellous
I
because
used
it
to
was,
love that.
that was great. It was an air raid shelter too. It was, I don't know, 4 stories below the, no bomb was ever going to get there. And Lucian would come down, and already he was famous, and the students were sort of agog when this wonderfully exotic person arrived. That's Lucian Freud.
I'd come down with Peter Watson.
Yes,
Yeah.
and life was marvellous. I mean, and also the Blitz made life so
It was
much more
wonderful,
exciting,
yes.
wasn't it?
And
the
also
nat-
being underground, which was
Yeah.
dodgy, dangerous and illegal. That was the only place to be because it was safe.
Everybody was so incredibly nice to everybody else.
Yes.
Because half of the people were on leave were going to go off to get killed the next day. So it was the sort of atmosphere was
And
tremendously
Lot had
keyed
broken
up.
out of jail, hadn't
And
he?
a lot came out of jail, and we danced our heads off. And Lucian actually accused me of something appalling, which I can't believe. Diana Baltiel, my girlfriend, was very right-wing, and Lucian swears that in a cab in London, I said to of course, Diana and I are very fascist.
Yes. No, I tell you what, it was, Diana and I are such fascists, it was. Hitler's so sweet.
And then it also always used to be Goering. You
Yeah.
know, Goering was such a good shot.
Yes,
And he came
that's
and
right.
used to come and shoot with us. The Field Marshal was darling. And there was this sort of going on. At the same time, all one's best friends were going off to the wars and getting shot or wounded. Or
And there were songs about, there was one I remember, it went, Hitler had only got one ball. Do you remember that?
I do
or not?
remember that,
It
yes.
went, Hitler had only got one ball. Goering had two, but very small. Himmler had something similar, but Dr. Goebbels had nobbles so tall. I always remember that.
I love that. I'd forgotten that.
Do you remember
yes.
that?
I have memories of you on a bicycle.
Yeah, I always had that.
with an enormous bird or a zebra's
Yes.
head.
Well, I had both. That's my stuffed zebra, which I used to get. That was Paddington, Delamere Terrace, along the canal.
But were you looking at sort of surrealist paintings?
Yes, Sirico very
Because
much.
this was done in 44, so you were 21, weren't you?
Yes. I wasn't working at any school with a group, in connection with anyone. I had a friend who'd helped me get a studio or a room, Peter Watson, every now and then, but I wasn't in any way accepted or really acceptable. He introduced me to people who had galleries who were interested in new art or whatever it was called, yeah, young painters. And comparatively speaking, I sold things to the Tate Gallery, John Rothenstein, very early on. I mean, I was 22 or something, which is very young for then. But you know, when people ask me what I did, like when you're a young man, you or at art school or wherever, you don't like to say, at least most people don't, I'm a student or I'm trying to find out. They'd say, what do you do? And I said, I'm an artist. I wanted to shock and amaze. And amaze, surprise, yes.
Lucian, when Guillaume Apollinaire, the poet,
Yes.
invented the word surrealism, that it had a hyphen. And what he and Picasso meant by surrealism was that the image is more real than the real thing.
Than the real thing, exactly.
And then Breton took it and corrupted it.
Completely.
And took away the hyphen. And surrealist became dreams,
Spirits.
yeah. and all kinds of other things. But the basic meaning of surrealism was making things, objects or images, more real. And it seems to me that is exactly what you're doing in those early paintings. Well,
yeah.
That's what's so impressive about them, is the reality of these things. It's, there are no surrealistic heightening. I mean, they were just more real than the real thing.
Yeah, that's what I was trying for.
And that's why they're so impressive, is that whether it's a face or what have you, they have this incredible intensity.
What was your decision to change your brushes?
The earliest ones are when I worked with sable brushes,
Why were you changing?
because I've hardly ever been interested or influenced by what people said. But when they said my work had a Germanic quality, I couldn't bear it.
Oh, that's interesting. What's wrong with having a Germanic
No,
quality?
because I didn't like anything to do with all that.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with it.
How long after war ended that Europe opened up so you could get to France?
As soon as I was allowed to, it was very hard to go.
Yeah.
I went in 46, which was very early.
And money was so difficult. You
Money
weren't allowed
was
to
so
take
hard.
any money
Firstly,
out of the
to
country.
get it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
if you did, you couldn't get it out.
Was that the Caroline? Were they done in Paris?
In Paris,
Yes.
yes. It looks Parisian, doesn't
It
it?
certainly does. Yes.
That was at that hotel, Rue de Saint-Père.
And then didn't Picasso try and make off with Caroline, or wasn't
Apparently, yes. I don't really know, partly because he was, to put it mildly, as you know better than me, very secretive.
I think Picasso particularly liked to take girls away from other painters.
I think you're right. I think it's, I think it gave him a real kick.
And that's why he took, what's that woman called who Francis painted all the time?
Isabel.
Isabel
Yeah.
Rawsthorne. When we were young, the most famous British artist, modern British artist,
Graham
was
Sutherland.
Graham Sutherland.
Yeah, quite.
And now he's completely forgotten.
Oddly, it was through Graham that I met Bacon, because I said, being young and very tactless, to Graham, who I met through Peter Watson, tell me, Graham, who in your view is the best painter in England? Which he obviously thought he was. He said, someone you'd never have heard of. Absolutely not.
Right, yes.
Unless you, which I'm sure you don't or couldn't
Yeah.
if you wanted to, go to upper class all-night casinos. Well, of course I didn't. So that was Francis.
You always seem to me not just a very British painter, but a London painter by virtue of the way you, more than any other painter of your generation, captures the light of London.
Well, I've always loved London, but
And
I don't know if that explains it to any degree. But
well, your love of London, I think, is reflected in the light of London, which
Yeah.
is in interior paintings or exterior paintings, and it's so much. It's not French light or German light. It's very, very, very English light.
yes. I don't like mystification. I work slowly, as you know, from a small number of people, and that's about it. And since I'm very spoilt for my own way and selfish, I'm just trying to do what I want to do, like many another, no doubt. I work from the people that interest me, and I like working over again from them.